Again, welcome to the Chicagoland Racers Reunion, as well as the memorabilia and collectibles show. We're going to start out with one of our reunion interviews. Tony Baranek, who's helped us with this every year, is going to be up here on the microphone. If you'd like to sit down and listen, you can. We have chairs up here. Our first two people getting interviewed, both former champions in the Chicagoland area, actual multiple champions. Larry Schuler, track championships at 3 different racetracks back in that magical season of 1976. Mike Varner, hobby stock champion at Raceway Park, Grundy County Speedway, Illiana Speedway. Both of them ran ARCO. They're up here and they are going to be interviewed. So if you want to come on up and be part of that, we're going to do that momentarily. I'll pass the microphone over to Tony. And Tony, I'll get you Mike and I'll get you Larry, and we'll get these two down.
Thank you, Steve. We've got a couple of legends here at the main table. One might have been watching the other one when in his early days of racing. On my left, Larry Schuler. Larry, one of the winningest race car drivers in the history of Chicagoland short track racing. And on my right, a guy who was the 1980 Raceway Park Street Stock Hobby Stock champion, and I got to drive his car one night and spun it out. Mike Varner. Larry, what's it like to come and see all these people looking at the, enjoying the old times? And I'm sure everyone here is glad to see you here.
Well, it's good to see people. I've been in a garage with a race car in it since 1960. And a lot of that was Raceway Park. And a lot of this today is Raceway Park. But I've also got to see people I've driven with and driven around and been around all racetracks all across the country. So this is my first time here. I hope it won't be the last.
Well, Larry, when Steve said that he wanted me to interview here, and he said, yeah, he came up through the ranks like so many guys. And I was thinking to myself, came up through the ranks? He was always a late model champion. What was coming through the ranks for you?
Well, I was lucky to be able to start in late models. That was because my dad, with some of his stuff, he wasn't racing anymore, but it's still late model. But I had always watched so many of the guys, so it almost seemed natural. The speed was relative because I was lucky to have a car to halfway handle good, so I was kind of spoiled with that. But to be able to race with legends that I had watched so many years, that was different. I had a father, a great father, but I also had raced with a lot of other guys that I considered my dads, and I was in a very unique time.
Who were your racing heroes?
Well, obviously my dad, Ray Young, Bud Kaler, Harry Simonson. I just keep going. I got to watch the first Norm Nelson win at the Bentonhausen race. There's just too many guys. I'm going to leave people out. I'll tell you, the guy sitting over here gave me as much trouble as I could get, and he also gave me my greatest compliment, but I cannot repeat what he said. But I was really, really, really tickled with what he said.
Mike, he just threw you a nice compliment. What was it like? What was it like racing with Larry Schuler?
Well, when you raced with Larry, he was on the scale. This is what you had to do. You had to race people like Larry Schuler, who had been everywhere and won many, many different races all over the country. And if you ran good with Larry, then you knew you were getting up to par pretty good with him, And he was always clean with me. The compliment he's talking about is a race where I was faster, but that night. But I just couldn't get around him. He used me up and never touched me or anything else, and I just couldn't get around that SOB that night. And it was one of the best jobs a drive. I learned a lot from that. I learned a lot from him all the time. Every time I raced against him, he's much more than just a local guy that did well. This guy is way beyond that.
Larry, was it 1975, the year you were the winningest driver
We
in the
did real
nation?
good in 75, but 76 was the one we went. We won championships in 3 different states at 3 different tracks, and they were Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, so it was a lot of traveling. We were in Wisconsin, that was 4 hours away. Grundy was an hour away, Ileana was an hour away, and all the work that you have to do in between, and that was going between 2 cars, 2 different garages, so I was pretty busy, but 76 is the one we won more races than anybody in the country.
Were you keeping track of it as it was happening?
You never do. If somebody wants to know how many races I won, I have no idea, and I still don't. So I hope somebody's keeping track somewhere.
Larry, I have a question for you. 3 track championships, same year, 3 different states. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, correct? You weren't married, right?
No.
I thought so.
A year later I was, but somehow found time for that too.
Mike, you were bad fast in the hobby stock division at Raceway Park at a time when there were a lot of bad fast cars. Can you just put into words what that division was like? I mean, I think it started in 1973. And it was it was very successful right from the start. But by 1978, 79, 80, any one of 12 to 15 cars could win on a given night. What was so special about hobby stocks at Raceway Park?
Well, one of the things that I liked once I got fast, I didn't like getting beat up and passed and spun out on the way up, but when I did get to where I could win some racing, it was a contact sport for sure, but it wasn't between a bunch of us. It was, yeah, you can rub on me and you can get by and everything's fine, and it was just a good way of learning. Raceway Park was the learning place. It teaches you to react rather than think, first off. If you have to think about where you're going, then you're at Raceway, it's too late. You're already in the wreck.
Who are the toughest dogs out there? I mean, the Pontons were just ridiculously tough to deal with.
Yeah, old man Ponton, damn him. He's the guy I'm talking about. He didn't have much patience, but he won a lot of races, My toughest competition always out there every night was Dan Deutsch. Dan Deutsch.
Oh, Danny Deutsch. Okay. How about Scott Sturkowitz? He was a good one.
They were always great, but just somehow or another, me and Deutsch ended up racing almost every race. We raced each other at one time or another during the race. At Raceway, once they got strung out, it depended on where you were. You just can't lose. You couldn't lose the bottom. So if you run outside, maybe a lot of times Scott and a bunch of them other guys run outside and they got in the back, and it's a struggle. You got 12 laps to pass 15 cars. So
What was the hot car back then? Was it Monte Carlos or was it Chevelles? What was the hot car?
Chevelles, mostly Chevys. Motors were everywhere, so you could do a lot with that. And then I think the thing that I like most about the fact that I raced hobby stock was that a guy by the name of Dave Waltmeyer offered me a ride in a late model the year after I won a championship, and that got me going in that direction.
I was just going to ask you about that. Then you made the step up to the late model class, and you took it beyond Raceway Park. You did well at Grundy County Speedway, and you dabbled, I would think, at Ileana as well. How was that step?
It was painful at times because you just want to run so good. Best advice I ever had was, Mike, you're at Raceway Park. Sometimes you have to slow down to go faster. You could drive into that corner, but that curve, you still had to go around it, and I used to slide up a little bit, but it took time. It took time, and racing people like Larry and all the Weltmeyers and Kempermans and all the other guys through the years. If you don't learn from them, you're just wasting your time.
Larry, when you look back and you think about when you raced in the 60s, and then you're standing at Grundy County Speedway after winning a feature race in 2018, do you ever stop and think, what am I still doing here?
Not really. I've been fortunate to be able to enjoy what I do and been around good people, good cars, and that makes it much easier to do. I still don't get out of the car all hot and sweaty. I feel like I'm kind of born to do it. It's very natural to do and very enjoyable to do. If it wasn't any fun, it's too much work.
Well, you're so popular today, even today, with the fans. How did you keep that just camaraderie with the fans? The fans never turned on you during your career, did they?
Well, I think when I first started, I was plenty rough. I can remember Bud Kaler spun me out. He was the first guy to spin me out. And the first guy I spun out was a guy sitting over here with Wayne Para. And I got to have a gamut of people do that. That was Raceway Park. And those guys were legends when I was there. And I got to be around them. They were the guys that started the sport that we call late model racing. They started it. And then I've got to bridge the gap to now. And, you know, I'm talking on the phone the other day with Gary Blue. These are guys you just don't get to be with. Rusty Wallace, Trickle, all these guys we got to race with. And that's only due to being able to have people that wanted to do that work, wanted to do that kind of travel. You better enjoy it. It's a lot of work.
In so many cases, champions, top competitors, at some point, the sport passes them by. That's never happened to you. What has been the number one thing you've done to keep yourself sharp, to stay on top of it, and give Eddie Hoffman headaches every Friday night?
Well, I think it's no different than it ever was. You got to have good equipment. And I've been fortunate to be around people that provide it, help you with it, and work on it. I always had an interest in making a car race. I always thought that was a neat thing to be able to take an apparently uncontrollable object and control it. And I still enjoy that part to this day. I probably enjoy the garage work as much as I do racing. There was once upon a time you did the garage thing because you had to. Now I do it because I want to, and I really enjoy it.
Well, we certainly hope you have a great 2019 season. Everybody, Larry Schuler, let's have a round of applause. And our longtime racing veteran, Mike Varner.
Thanks a lot, Tony. It's always a pleasure to be here. And for the third straight year, it's my pleasure to talk to the legendary Wayne Adams, the longtime voice of Raceway Park. Let's hear it. Wayne Adams with us today in the house. And somebody told me in about a couple of weeks you're going to have a birthday, 100 years old.
Check. Well, that's what they tell me. And so many people have asked me, how can you live to be 100? Well, I don't really know. All I know is the last time I saw my doctor, he asked me, are you still smoking and drinking? And I said, yeah. He said, don't quit.
Wayne, I was thinking about this the other day. There's few people around still that saw races at the Chicago Armory, indoor racing, the board track at Soldier Field, the dirt track at Hanson Park, the Jungle Park Speedway in Indiana, and the dirt at Winchester. Incredible. I mean, the man did it. He was there. He's historically unmatchable, I think. But Wayne, over the years, you ended up at Raceway Park, the world's busiest track, and you're just legendary. I mean, I remember as a kid walking into a sporting goods store and you were selling some trophies to the owner, and I turned around to my buddy and I go, that's Wayne Adams, and the voice so distinctive, and it's just great to see you. Wayne, tell us a little bit about those days at Raceway Park, those early days where you once told me they were thinking about running there 7 nights a week because the darn thing was so popular.
Well, I really didn't start announcing until after the war. And I served in World War II for 4.5 years. And when I came back, I got involved in auto racing again. And that's when the midget racing group started to split from the A's and B's, the expensive cars and the less expensive cars. And I was friends with both divisions, of course. And at the time, the B class, the lesser powerful cars, got a contract to race at Hanson Park on the north side. For some reason, you know, I wrote weekly columns for Illustrated Speedway News, and I started writing for them in 1940, which was before the war. After the war, I started writing columns again. And so I was involved with both the A and B division of midget racing. Lo and behold, the B midgets got a contract to race at Hanson Park on the northwest side. I didn't see their first show, but apparently they were unhappy with their announcer, and Lou Scally, who was president of the UARA, called me and asked me if I would like to announce their second race. I did. Pete Jenin and Nick Jenin and Bud Kaler were in the grandstands that night, and they came down after the races and told me what a hell of a job I did. Well, to me, it was just normal. I was having fun, and I was announcing a race. Pete Jenin said, "How would you like to announce at Raceway Park?" I said, "No, you have an announcer." He says, "Not anymore." 2 weeks after that, Art Foles called me. He was running midgets at Soldier Field on Sunday. Art Foles called me and said, "How would you like to announce at Soldier Field?" I said, "Sounds good to me." Here all of a sudden, I had 3 racetracks to announce a week, and that was good. And I enjoyed it very much because I enjoy racing. I'm having fun at a race, and I'm trying my best when I announce to let all the people in the grandstand know how much fun it was.
We're talking 1947, and this gentleman here announcing at Hanson Park, which was up on the northwest side of Chicago, UARA midgets, Raceway Park on Saturday nights doing the midgets, and then Soldier Field, the big arena there on the lakefront, of course, on Sunday nights. And Wayne told me the story one time. They ran this police benevolent race, and they had tens of thousands of fans there for this special event, the police benevolent race, and Wayne's in the infield announcing, and you remember that, just looking up there?
Do I remember that? I walked out in the middle of Soldier Field. They told me there's 77,000 people there. And I said, "What the hell am I doing here?" But I announced the race, and it was so much fun. I enjoyed it, and I just hope the people enjoyed it. I know that 77,000 people a lot of people.
And then that was a big deal because they brought cars in from California and brought them in by airplanes and landed them at what is now Midway Airport. That was quite the deal. And then they started an idea, a guy named Chuck Scharf, or two guys, Chuck Scharf and Eddie Anderson. They were running midgets at Gill Stadium, correct, in 1948. And these two gentlemen, Chuck Scharf and Eddie Anderson, they were drivers and car owners. They had this idea about short track stock car racing, and you were there. You were announcing the midget races at Gill Stadium in 1948, and this thing about short track stock car racing around these parts began.
Yeah, Chuck Scharf and Eddie Anderson were a couple of fellas that had a used car lot somewhere on the west side of Chicago. And they were great racing fans, but these two guys had the idea that a stock car could run around a quarter-mile track. So to prove it, they brought a couple of cars from their lot one night, and they had a special race between these two drivers in between the midget races. And Chuck and Charlie, they decided to put on a show. So they not only raced, but they knocked one another all over the racetrack. The people thought it was the greatest thing they'd ever seen. Before you know it, we were running stock cars at Gill Stadium, or better known as 87th Street Speedway at the time. And we continued to run them in 1947, yes, or 48. And then in 1948, at the end of the season, Pete Jenin and Nick Jenin from Raceway Park decided to run a big stock car race after the midget season had ended. And lo and behold, a lot of the midget drivers were now driving in stock cars. And we had a 300-lap race in, I think it was in late September or early October at Raceway. And Danny Claytis won it driving a Jeep. And in 1949, Raceway Park decided they would run stock car racing at least once a week. And that worked out pretty well. As a matter of fact, it worked out so well they had to double the seating capacity at Raceway Park. I don't recall what year they put the backstretch stands in, but they could now seat 8,000 people. And they were selling out every night. They'd sell all the tickets every night. And from there, stock car racing just took over.
I had the pleasure last night to induct Eddie Anderson and Chuck Scharf into the Illinois Stock Car Hall of Fame, which you are a member of, along with Bud Kaler and Pete Jenin and a whole bunch of other folks from the Chicagoland area. Wayne, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. You are just a wealth of information, knowledge. I'm lucky to have known you personally. I'm lucky that I've been able to keep track and read all the old race columns, the old Midwest Whispers columns that you wrote for Illustrated Speedway News, and just you are just part of the cloth of Chicagoland automobile racing, just part of the fabric of, you were there, you saw it from cars being wheeled out of a used car lot to specially built stock cars and everything in between. As always, Wayne Adams, darn, it's great to see you.
You know, Stan, it's great. You know, I just enjoy this like I enjoyed auto racing. Look at this. I come out here now and I see all the fans. They're all such happy people, and we all had such good times at Raceway Park. I wound up announcing 2,625 racing programs, and over 2,000 of them were at Raceway Park. It was a lot of work, a lot of fun, but I enjoyed every minute of it. It's really great.
Once again, let's have a big hand for Wayne Adams, but one other thing. I think the feature's ready to go, or the trophy dash, as they used to say, so how did you used to introduce that trophy dash every night at Raceway Park?
Well, actually, this is the introduction that I normally use. I don't know, my voice is kind of failing today, but if you arrived at Raceway Park early, you would hear me say, "Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, this is Wayne Adams bidding you welcome to Raceway Park, the world's busiest track, on behalf of Pete and Nick Jenny." And we're all set to get underway. The starter is ready, the cars are ready, the drivers are ready. They'll be taking qualifying laps in just a minute. Everybody's ready. Are you ready?
Mr. Wayne Adams, thank you much, Wayne. Always a pleasure.
Regarding Chicagoland short track racing certainly wouldn't be complete without stopping off in Willow Springs at the Action Track of Clay Santa Fe Speedway. We have a table full of Santa Fe competitors, and I can't think of anyone better to talk to them about those memories than longtime Santa Fe journalist and host of Victory Lane radio show, Rick Bill.
Wow, this is always it's always a fun time to get back and reminisce about the days at Santa Fe Speedway. You know, when tracks are gone, all you have left is memories. And boy, there isn't a lot of memories sitting at this table right now. I'll start at my left. Down here is, if you saw the cars out there at Santa Fe and other racetracks, and they all look good on opening night, all lettered up really nice. Well, it's because of the new recent inductee into the Illinois Stock Car Hall of Fame last night, Bill Jive Jarvis, right here. Next to him is a guy that I can say at one time was probably on the top of the heap at Santa Fe Speedway. And by top of the heap, I mean, if anybody was there for the big crash at the 200 where all the cars piled up, Steve Passiva's car was the top car in that heap at the 200. This is about to be my co-host tonight, Tommy Lee.
Tommy Dijik.
Tommy is probably a walking historian of Santa Fe. Him and his dad worked on a lot of cars. Jimmy Portopillo's car, Freddie Lofgren's car, Bobby Pullman Jr.'s car. And if you follow the Santa Fe Speedway page on Facebook, you see a lot of pictures. They're all from Tommy, so he's going to put some input in today. Boy, what can you say about this guy right here? Did a lot of racing out at Santa Fe. Car number 32, D. Marcel. But not only did he race at Santa Fe, he thought, you know what? I'm sick of pushing these guys around on the track. I'm going to become an official, push them around in the track. And a long-time race official out at Santa Fe. How about a father-son team? Remember the rubber ducky? Joe Rossio Sr.? What a car. Fast car. I think you had a Garrett chassis, didn't you?
Yeah.
And of course, what fathers do, sons do. So Joe Rossio Jr. is here. He learned how to go pretty fast out at Santa Fe. So let's start a few questions here and talk to some of these guys. Jive, pick up that mic there. Just like last night when I ask you a question, you know, you got to talk close to the microphone.
Is it working?
No, it's not working.
Hello.
There it is.
How about a few bars of Freebird, anybody?
Jive, last night was a special night for you.
Yes, it was.
After all those years, lettering cars and racing, you weren't afraid to get in a race
That's
car
the
and go
part we
around the
don't
track.
talk about.
Now how many things are you going to tell me not to talk about?
Pardon me?
You already gave me a list of things not to talk about. So choose between that or prison. I don't care, whatever you want to do.
The what?
Choose between that or prison. I don't care. No.
Oh.
But here's a question I've always wanted to ask sign
Okay,
painters.
all right.
All right, sign
Yeah.
painters.
Yeah.
You sit there and you work on that car and you make them look beautiful. Beautiful. And once you get your artwork done, they go out to the track and they tear all your artwork up.
Well, there's no respect there for a sign painter.
But you're right, there is no respect for a sign painter.
You guys ought to be ashamed of yourself, especially some of you guys sitting down there. Okay? Just wanted to say that, you know.
Well, there was also a point last night where they said, you know, you get no respect because the guys work on their cars all year, and it's 2 weeks before the race, and they call you up and go, hey, come on and letter my car. I got to get out to the racetrack. Put the pressure on you.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes you get home, probably leave the house 7 o'clock in the morning, and you get home 7 o'clock the next morning, sober yet. I didn't drink back then, but things change.
You did 2 cars in one night, right? Before race season?
That's the word, and it's really foggy to me. It's a long time ago. I think it was Earl J.
I think that's what it was.
Earl J. and maybe it was Fireball was
Well, Fireball was
involved in it. Yeah. And another thing, and I said this last night up at the Hall of Fame. If you want to live a long time, don't ever get in a car with Fireball. Okay? Just saying.
Jive, hand that phone to Steve Passler here for a second as I'm working my way down here.
All righty.
You know, Steve, met you many years ago. Actually, we pitted next to each other at Santa Fe.
Very true.
You pitted there back when I was working with Denny Falcos. If you didn't know, Denny passed away last Friday. We won't get into that. I'm still a little too emotional, but at any rate, Steve here we had another guy in the pits, and Steve kind of took him away from us, and that was Lar Nuri.
Oh, yeah. Larry? Yeah, Kankakee Larry, we call him, yeah.
And Lar, rest his soul, but
Yeah.
give us a little retrospect on that Santa Fe 200 crash that you ended up being on the top of the pile.
Well, my dad told me to finish on top, but not that way. We were running okay, everything's were going smooth, coming up on the 100 lap mark, and big puff of dust up in the air in the corner, and I guess we should have been watching what was coming out instead of just watch what was going in, and we just kept driving in there.
Yeah.
It was a mistake on our part too, so.
Well, you've raced at a lot of tracks. In
Yes.
fact, you still race.
Yes.
I know Denny used to tell me you could have setups, basic setups at a lot of tracks, but Santa Fe always had a different setup if you needed to get around that.
Yes, that's very true. It was a very unique place to set your car up, drive. You had to be smooth, clean, hit your marks. Sometimes it was the top, sometimes it was the bottom, Sometimes it was both.
Well, yeah. I remember an interview, way back when you were still running, Dennis, I'll call you Dennis, instead of D, but when Jan Gabriel was interviewing Jimmy O'Connor. And that's still when we had big blocks in the cars, and it kind of transitioning into the small blocks. And I don't know if Jimmy was BSing just for the crowd or not, but he said, well, I really believe the groove is moving up here at this racetrack. And so I think we're going to start setting up our car for the high groove at this point. Well, I know it probably got high. A groove got high when the cars really changed, but back then, I'm not so sure that worked, but that was O'Connor doing that with Jan Gabriel and everybody else kind of added to why everybody wanted to go to Santa Fe, because the track is good as announcers are good, and he made it exciting, and he made a new different perspective of going there. And I think that's what made Santa Fe as special as it was. So let me ask Dennis. Dennis, what made you change from driving to deciding to become an official?
Well, I really didn't stop driving because I wanted to. It got to be financially prohibitive to pay the bills with the car, and I had a philosophy of if I could pay for what I was spending each week, the cost of the car, the cost of the engine was extra at the beginning of the year, but I wanted to be able to at least maintain my expenses during the year, and I had an offer to buy the car, so I sold it. And at the time, I was dabbling with ARCA racing. I did some stuff up at Milwaukee. I ran there a couple times, ran some ARCA races, and I was crewing for Bob Shack at the time, traveling around. We were doing ARCA racing and NASCAR racing. And I really didn't want to become a track official. It was one of those things that Howard Teat was in the hospital, and Kenny came to me and a week or so before the 200, and I want to say that would have been 1989, and he said, I need a hand, I need an assistant. Would you come out and give me a hand? And I had always told him if he got in a bind, I would be happy to help him out, because Kenny, bless his soul, Kenny was one of the greatest mentors that any of us had at that racetrack.
Well, you just
Kenny,
and that's what I was going to say to you. You couldn't ask for anybody better than Kenny Keene.
Kenny Keene treated all of us at the racetrack like we were his children, and he was raising us. The times I argued with him at the pit shack, he always came around in the end and was my big brother kind of image. But Kenny came to me, and we had talked a lot on the phone. And prior to that, unbeknown to most people here, I was working for Boyce Industries at the time. I've helped the track with their rules and regulations, the rules that we set up. Some of what we did with the star cars, with the roof protection bars, rollover, we call them a roof support bar as opposed to a rollover bar. I was doing things behind the scenes anyway, and Kenny asked me to give him a hand with the 200, and all of a sudden I was thrust into this arena of all these racers that were jacked up on adrenaline trying to qualify for the 200. And
the first 10 cars usually made the show for sure. After that, it was all over with.
Let me tell you, the first experience with being an official was tough, because the very first person I disqualified was a gentleman by the name of Bob Pierce, who happened to run my number 32 when we were both racing against each other down at the Kankakee Speedway. From there, unfortunately, Howard passed away. My mother passed away in the spring. I was flopping around like a fish out of the pond, and sitting up in the press box observing the races and kind of helping Mary Lou and John and the folks out there. I was doing a little bit of scoring and that sort of thing. And Kenny says, I need him on the track, not in the press box. And they dragged me down on the track in the beginning of the 1990 season, and I ended up being an official there for the next 6 seasons. And that's how it eventually came to an end.
You know, you said that was a good analogy, that Kenny Keene was the dad and all of us were his children, but he seldom spanked us. He reasoned with us. Now, I know there were times, but you know, there were so many times, racing there that I would discuss things with Kenny, and it's pretty hard to discuss things and you're very animated about it when somebody just remains calm. I mean, you're not getting any reaction, and then you listen to him.
Well, Kenny being calm when you were arguing with him was enough to annoy anybody. Yeah. But Kenny was real good at telling people, come back and see me in 30 minutes. Or he would send the person to the tower. By the time the person walked all the way up to the tower, he'd get up to the guy at Howard, and Howard would say, no, my track steward, my director of competition's in charge of that. You need to go talk to Kenny. And then he'd wear the guy out. Let me think of a couple of examples of how Kenny did things. One tight in particular, I was down at the payoff window, ranting and raving up one side of the payoff booth and down the other and just calling Kenny names and carrying on. And he just sat there stoic. And when I was all done, Kenny looked at me and he says, "Do you feel any better?" And I went, "Not really." He goes, "Go home, come back tomorrow."
Yeah.
And that was the way he handled it. But we also, we had a gentleman that was a very good sportsman racer, and he moved up into late models. And he got a little aggressive and caused some problems on the racetrack. We stopped him before he signed in. When he got to the payoff, or the sign-in shack at the beginning of the night, he could not sign in because we wouldn't let him. And Kenny went and talked to him. We sat on the logs outside of the fourth turn over in the parking lot. We sat him down and we settled him down. And I watched Kenny work this driver as to why he wasn't permitted to sign in and what we were going to do if he continued and on and on and on. And he settled down and he did very well. And then I think, and Joe Jr., if I'm wrong about this, please correct me, but one of the things that Kenny always told us was that if a driver caused a problem on the racetrack, as long as there wasn't physical contact, fisticuffs, we would penalize the person. And he said the worst thing you can do to a driver is throw him out of the racetrack and tell him it's okay to sit in the grandstands, but let his car run and let somebody else drive it, because he's going to sit in the stands and go, "Boy, if I didn't screw up, I would be in the car right now." And I think we did that to you, Joe. And it worked, because we're still sitting here, and when Joe and I get together, we laugh about old times.
Was this the driver you were referring to?
Yes.
In the beginning?
Yeah,
You know what
yes.
I was going to say? Well, I got about 10 drivers going through my head who that could have been, and it ended up being you.
I was trying to. Yeah, I was trying to figure out if he was referring to me or if it was one of the other 9 drivers. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And for me, that was probably one of the longest 3-month suspension I think I ever had. Was sitting in the stands watching John Garrett Sr. Drive my car around.
That was a
and actually
spanking.
won a few features during that time too. So it was like, God dang it, can't do that no more.
What did Dad say to you when that happened?
I don't know. He was trying to get me off the fence and keep
That's
me out
my
of trouble.
boy.
Yeah, I don't know about that. There were many times that he, that tap on the shoulder came and grabbed me by the arm and pulled me back and said,
But your dad was your idol. That is why you wanted to do what you do. And I suppose when you were younger, you sat in the stands when you watched your dad race. Didn't it really make you feel good when he'd pull out on the track and everybody liked your dad and the kids were standing up and they were cheering and that was their favorite car? I mean, really, that meant kind of like Smitty. Everybody likes Smitty, but Joe, I mean, did you realize what an impact you made on a lot of the people when you were racing out there?
Yeah, I tried to be fair with everybody, and everybody was pretty much fair with me.
Yeah,
Didn't
but
have too many problems.
But I mean, the fans that you had, you had a substantial amount of fans.
Well, the Duck did. Nobody knows Joe Rosso. Everybody knows the Duck.
Yeah, I got that.
I've had people come to. When we moved down to Alabama, we had a big garage sale in Shorewood, and some people showed up. They were talking racing, and my wife says, "Well, my husband used to race." Who was it? Joe Rossio. Well, don't ring a bell. The Duck. Oh, the Duck. Oh, yeah.
All right, we had the Duck car, and we had the Bride car. That's what my daughter used to call Camille Connolly's car with the bride on the back. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's Snoopy too.
And we had
that's
Snoopy.
Right. That's right.
We had the whole car. Charlie Shane had a Jaws car and a Pac-Man car at one time.
Oh, Pink Panther. That's right. All right. Who had the car? Well, a lot of them were, but that had the old style beer can attached on the trunk. Anybody remember that? Yeah. Okay. All right. I gotta go. Just before I'm gonna head back down this way for a minute. Kenny Keene. My favorite story of Kenny Keene was a half-mile show, and it's about the time when Billy Martin was running the Yankees, and you may remember this. and I don't even remember what the infraction was, but I'm across the track on a yellow, and Kenny Keene's out there, and I'm telling him, where somebody was wronged, and that's not right, and you got, and Kenny's just standing here like this while I'm going through all those antics, and he explains to me why I was wrong in the right tone, and I knew I was wrong, so I said, Kenny, just go along with me on this. I says, I'm going to kick dirt on your feet, and then you kick me out. So I'm kicking dirt on his feet like I'm Billy Martin used to do to the umpires. I said, okay, now, Kenny. Kenny went like this, like he kicked me out, and the stands went wild. That was one of my favorite moments with Kenny Keene. Just, I'm wrong, you're right, so let's go through with it. Hey, Jive, I gotta get you here again. Hand Jive his microphone.
Hello.
What did you enjoy the most at Santa Fe? Watching the cars you lettered out there? Or are you actually competing out there?
Actually, watching all the damage that I got to touch up and make money on during the week. A lot of repeat customers. When you did race cars, you also got to do their pickups, their dump trucks, and all this kind of stuff, and actually built a career out of it. I literally raised my kids at Santa Fe, so I got a lot of good memories, especially with these guys here.
You got a lot of repeat customers out there, didn't you?
I sure did, and I still got some of them.
Yeah.
This is a question for all of you, all right? And I'll start, Steve, with you. If Santa Fe Speedway was still there, would you be racing there?
Absolutely. You don't realize what you had till it's gone.
That's true. Exactly. That's very true. You're right.
And I was one of the first guys to leave there and go venture out and to other racetracks. And you don't, like I said, you don't realize what we had.
And you know what? When you left, you missed your going away party.
I did?
Darn. Dennis, how about you? If Santa Fe was still there, would you still be there?
Absolutely. Santa Fe was like a family.
You're right.
And this can be said for every racetrack that's out there. Talk with any one of your own group. Everybody looked out for one another. We're all competitors on the track, but the guys that gave me the hardest time as an official always came over and apologized later on. The guys that were the hardest to deal with, Jim Loomis Sr., Paul Reber, the boss, those kind of people, when the chips were down, they were right there to help you. When I was stuck over there in the first corner of the quarter mile on a regular Saturday night show, if I had to go on the track, I turned to Jim Loomis Sr. and I said, tell those people to stay back, I got to go out there. He said, no problem, and he took care of it. Bill Clemens, there was a time when I was in the parking lot trying to direct traffic on a scout night, on a rainout. Bill Clemens darn near climbed over the fence out of the pits to come help me because some drunk that was out there was giving me a hard time. And that's what made Santa Fe and every one of your racetracks really unique, because you can be competitors on the track and you walk away and you're friends. I remember going to Sycamore, Arnie Gardner and Bob Kelly battle it out all the time, and the two of them were arm in arm going to the bar afterwards. And you got to remember that kind of stuff. That's what made the racetrack neat. That's what makes racing fun.
I heard, before I go down, I heard a story about Arnie one time. They said Arnie Gardner was so smooth when he was racing, he'd use the car in front of him to burn out the car in front of that guy, and then everybody would blame the guy that Arnie hit in the first place, and they loved Arnie, and they're yelling at the other guy. That's how smooth Arnie was.
Arnie taught me a number of driving tricks, and I used them effectively.
There you go. Santa Fe, man, would you still be there?
I absolutely would be. I grew up in Santa Fe, watching my dad race there my whole entire life. Santa Fe was my home. And, after Santa Fe kind of evaporated, I traveled around, raced some other racetracks, and that family feeling that Dennis referred to, I've not experienced that in any other racetrack I've ever been to the extent that it was at Santa Fe. And to answer your question, I would absolutely still be racing.
Joe, again, I always thought you were a good man. Sportsman, you on the track was just, you're just one of those good guys. And I really don't know if you ventured outside of Santa Fe much, but I think that Santa Fe was still there. That's where you'd be, right?
Well, I'd probably be on the pit wall telling somebody else whether to run high or low or whatever, but I don't think I'd be racing right at this point in time.
That, if anybody wasn't at Santa Fe, the facilities were really amazing. The concrete stands, the way everything was laid out, it really was ahead of its time, I'm sure, when it was built back before we were born. 53, yeah. What?
And I'd like to give a shout out to some of the drivers that aren't with us anymore. Fred Royal, Bill Clemens,
I know
all the other ones. Fred Royal was one of my best friends in the world.
He always had a good-looking car.
Yeah.
Did you do Fred Royal's cars?
Great car.
No? Did you let him? That's why it was a good-looking car, I guess.
Of course, always.
Yeah.
Any car Jive lettered was that fantastic-looking car.
I remember the first time when I was out there and I saw lettered by Jive, I go, who the heck is Jive? And then, I got to figure out who Jive was, and man, it's been an honor.
Everybody wants to know how I got the name Jive. All right, today I'm going to tell the story. Years ago, and I was a teenager, and there was this future sportsman driver named Larry Robb, if you remember him. And he had a habit of drinking a lot, and he was young and stuff, and he'd get rowdy. And one night I told him, I said, go back and sit in the car. If you're going to be mouthy, have a little respect. He said, okay, and my last name is Jarvis. He said, okay, jive ass, and it stuck.
There you go. I got to ask everybody, too. I got to come back down here. Even though you were a driver and you can't mention yourself, who was your favorite driver of all time at Santa Fe?
Al Johnson.
Yeah, Al.
He would help anybody, anytime. He was just an all-around great guy.
I can't remember the year he won the championship, but I thought that is got to be the first guy that drove to a championship where his car pushed most of the year.
And not only that, when you could ride along with a driver. And who did my son pick? Not his father.
That was Al Johnson.
Wow, that's great. Speaking of favorite drivers, we're going to move down. But last night we were at the Stock Car Hall of Fame. Ed Hoffman was inducted into the Hall of Fame. And his son Eddie was there. And his granddaughter. And Ed had retired already and came back to the track and said to his granddaughter, who's your favorite driver? Now, and Eddie's standing there, he's racing, and she thinks for a minute, and she said, Dan Odell. Well, he was kind of a low buff driver. I mean, he didn't have a lot of... Ed Hoffman, on that day, went over and bought Odell 4 brand new tires to race that night because that was her granddaughter's favorite driver. And Eddie Hoffman helps him to this day on tires. I thought that was a pretty neat story. Oh, Dennis, now you can only name one. Who's it going to be?
That is a very unique question because I honestly don't know. There's so many drivers over the years. I mean, I came into that after the Ken Finley era. I've watched Jimmy O'Connor. It's kind of unfair because I've got to know these guys too.
You're right. Yep.
Jimmy, I enjoyed watching Jimmy. I enjoyed watching Larry Jackson, Arnie Gardner, Tony Izzo. I'm not sure what.
It was Izzo. I don't know how it turned into Izzo.
Yeah, I don't know. I slipped too. Tony, people seem to love him or hate him, but I will tell you something about Tony Izzo. When the rest of us were up at the beer stand telling stories and reminiscing about what we did that night, he was back at his shop writing down every spring, every shock, every tire pressure, every setting of the caster camber. He knew every detail of everything that ever went on his race car. And, I got to give him credit for that. When I've gone out of town and I was racing with Tony, he helped me get in the program. When I was in Atlanta and my street car broke, he says, my truck's open, the tools are in there. He said, we're going to the short track, just close the door when you're done. I didn't even know the man. So, yeah, you got to give it to all these different guys they've worked their way up into the ranks. They all deserve a little admiration.
Speaking of Tony, speaking of Shaggy, a little story about Shaggy. When my dad was actually partnered with Errol Van Allen back in '83, '84. I was just a little kid then. But the night before a half-mile show at 100 lapper, we blew the motor up. Microphone's not on? So it was the night before the 100 lapper, and we blew the motor up. Tony came up to us, handed us the keys to his shop, and said, "I have a brand new Rhine motor sitting there. Go in there, take it. I want to see you racing tomorrow night." I mean, that's just the kind of guy Tony was. To trust us with his motor, his shop. He says, "Go ahead, take the motor." We're like, "What if we blow it up?" He's like, "You blow it up, I blow it. What difference does it make? Go on, I want to see you racing next night." We put that motor in our car. I believe Tony won the feature. It was a 100 lapper. Kenny Pullman was second, and Errol finished third. My favorite driver? It's probably a toss-up. It's kind of not fair because I worked with several of them. I worked with, Errol, Freddie Lofgren, Jimmy Partapillo, Robert Pullman. I guess I would say Freddie Lofgren. He was just, he was a, pretty genuine person, pretty fair to all of us.
Yeah, Fast Freddie. He had some great years. He did. That was, Freddie, when he was running Sportsman, went to Falco's, and then he kind of started, getting them along one time, and Freddie started getting real good, and it was a half-mile show, and somehow this girlfriend of one of the drivers or whatever thought that Freddie had done her man wrong, and was up there and doing one of these numbers to him, and Freddie was there with his can of Coke that he always had. He drank Coca-Cola, and just listened to her like Kenny Keene would. The only difference was, all of a sudden, he just took the Coke and just dumped it on top of her head and walked away. That's kind of Freddie. Oh, Steve, come on now.
What?
I know. Who is your favorite driver?
Oh, me, of course. No. Tony Izzo helped me a lot when I first got in the late model. I pitted in his shop. He weaned us. He coached us. He helped us a lot. Helped us get going. That's why we were so successful as quick as we were. I'd have to say Tony. He did a lot for us. He was wonderful for Santa Fe, but a lot of people don't think so.
I tell you, what you mentioned, Dennis. I always think of you, D. Marcel. The Jimmy O'Connor and Tony Izzo wars back in those days were epic. Those two battling it out, and you're right. And Gabriel really made it going. But like you said, people came, either they liked him or they hated him, but they came to see him either win or see lose.
Right.
All right, Jive. Favorite driver?
All right, I got two favorite drivers, one on asphalt and one on dirt.
All right.
My asphalt driver was Dick Trickle.
Yep.
The man had a Ford and he kicked ass, okay? My second driver was Earl J. Hubert. With a 289 Ford, he went out there and he blew a lot of people away with that car. And that's why I liked him.
Well, I got to say, only because, my best friend in the world obviously was Denny Falco's. And he was such good friends with Arnie Gardner, and I got to meet Arnie, and we became good friends. And I'll leave Denny out of the equation. I think Arnie Gardner was one of the best, and just an all-around great guy, just my opinion. But you guys have been amazing today. This has been fun, and this is, even last night I was saying to my wife Susan that when we were at the other deal, it's really great to get people together and reminisce because, like I said in the beginning, when the racetracks are gone, all you have left is the memories of them. And some of these people need the recognition that they so deserve for what they've done all their years, all the hard work they've done, that grit under their fingernails, to put on a show every weekend, to compete. and the competition was always very competitive wherever you went, but I still think it was special at Santa Fe, and where else can you get so much dirt in your beer? So, again, Jive, thank you for being here. Steve Paspa, thank you. Tommy, thank you very much. Dennis, thank you. This guy's doing airplanes now. Junior, thank you very much. Joe, you're the man. Thank you very much. So that kind of ends the Santa Fe show, and hope to see you all here next year.
And thank you, Rick. Hey, thank you for doing this. Thank you for the radio show, and Jim McCarthy, and I apologize, the name of his partner?
Steve Bechtel.
Steve. A thank you to Jim and Steve for putting this thing together for us.
All right, thank you, everybody.
All right, everybody, we're going to go behind the scenes a little bit here at Raceway Park. I have three gentlemen up here who were very, very instrumental in the success of this racetrack for 50 years. On my left, he was often the first person a driver saw when he came to the racetrack. Fred Jacoby worked the pit shack where the drivers would sign in. He was the track registrar, and he did a lot of other duties there also. On my immediate right, we have Bobby Talaski, who was a pit steward and an assistant starter at Raceway Park from 1978 through the final days in the year 2000. And finally, on my right, all you ever saw was his back, because he was the flag man. The flag man. Roger Smith, for the better part of 25 years, was the main man at Raceway Park running the races. So the first person I want to start off with, let's start with the first person anybody saw. And, well, he just said the oldest. Fred, your career started at Raceway in 1968, but you were involved in local auto racing a long time before that. Tell us about where you started.
Well, in the early 50s, I used to go to Soldiers Field and help my dad signing in, and I wasn't old enough to get out on the track, but as time went on, I was helping him and able to do the signing in there, and then from there I went into the infield and was a corner worker that would help clean up cars or whatever they had, put out fires a couple times. And I never lined up any cars, but we had our own flag that when the starter threw the yellow, we'd get out and throw our own yellow. And that basically is all it. And then I went from there, and then in the wintertime we used to go to the amphitheater. In the amphitheater we had the Rod and Custom Show, and they had go-karts, they had indoor drags, we had the, at one time they had sports car racing where they used the whole 2 blocks of buildings. They used to go through the main entrance and then come around in the infield or whatever they want to call it, the circle. And at that time, Friday night, to get set for Saturday, we would go there and set up the fencing and all the other stuff, and a lot of times they had wrestling there at the time, and watched some of the wrestling and went from there. And then as time went on, Perry Lester took over, and I went to Raceway, and he took over not only Raceway, but he did Soldiers Field. He did Mazan. I worked Mazan. I used to work out in the cornfield out there. When it got dark, that was it. That was my time to get out of there. Then I used to go and, you know, put the go out to the infield and help out there in the Mazan. That wasn't only 1 year. And most of the time it was there. And then Iliana, I worked a couple nights. Then my brothers went there and worked at Iliana and that. But the majority of the time from then on, about 67, 68, Raceway, I used to do mostly the signing in with my dad, and then he was the pit steward. Then from there, I would take and go and help him out and anything in the track at that time once in a while. But that was about it.
You know, Fred, you were again the first person the drivers would see, so you probably got them when they were their happiest of the night.
Yeah, I got all the yelling and complaining. You know, I should have got extra pay for that because nobody else would talk to half these drivers and that. And when they did, you know, I would be the one that was always the fall guy. But I got along with everybody all right. There wasn't any problems, you know. Once in a while, we would have problems. And I remember Rich Halligan, we threw him out one night, and to get up back at me, he come and tuned the car up, and he backed the car up right almost to the window of the sign-in booth, and started the car, and let it run, and it, I don't know what he put in there, but he must have smoked it real good because he got me out of there. But that was about it. Like I say, most of the guys were okay.
I have to imagine that you were there in 1975, the night Dick Trickle showed up.
Yeah.
What kind of a surprise was that? Might have been 74, by the way, if anybody's
I can't
correcting
remember.
me.
It was around there, right.
What, you remember anything about it at all?
No, not really. You know, at that time, drivers would come and go, and they had the, I think, was it Rusty Wallace was there, and
Neil Bonnet.
Neil Bonnet, right? Yeah, and they were there. Like I say, all this memorabilia and all this stuff that they had there, I never thought about it. You know, a couple of years ago, I bought a program from Soldiers Field, and I never, all the years that I worked there, never even thought about keeping it, and I had to pay $25 for a program, and at that time, I think it was 25 cents for the program, and you got a pencil with it, you know. But otherwise, you know, memorabilia now, everybody's got this, that, save that. I wasn't a saver, and you know, at the time, it was just go there, and with my dad being in auto racing all the years, he worked for Granatelli, it was just part of it. Like the kids nowadays, they're going to basketball, football, baseball, whatever. I never had any of that because I didn't bring with my dad, and that was it. We just went to the races. We Milwaukee and Indianapolis every year, and that was part of my life at that time.
Mm-hmm. Let's take it over here to Bobby Talaski. Bobby, did you say that you flagged the final race?
Yeah, I flagged the final 2 years because Roger was the director of competition. He got the job that he didn't want. And yeah, I have the honor of flagging the last races at Raceway. But the funny thing is the story of how I started. You know, I used to come to Raceway when I was 5 years old. My dad was on the fire department at Cal Park. And they used to have the firemen there to keep the people out of the stairs and the stairwells and stuff. So racing was the only sport I ever loved. I can care less about baseball, football, hockey. My dad used to take me and he'd sit me by the ambulance gate and he'd say, all right, you sit right there. If you got to go to the washroom, you raise your hand. If you got to go, you want popcorn or something. So I'd always go to the racetrack with him. And then when I got old enough to go by myself, I'd sit by the pits and you know, always wanted to go, and when I got old enough to go in the pits, I hung around the pit gate. And I owe my job to the nicest man in the world, is Fred Jacoby Sr. I start hanging around there and standing by the telephone booth, and it was 1970, and he says to me one night, he says, you know, he says, I'm going to retire in a couple years. They want somebody to take my place. He says, you've been standing here long enough. You want the job? And he said, they want somebody to break me in. I said, fine. And I was there from that day forward until the last race. And yeah, talk about the night that Dick Trickle was there. That was one of the most memorable nights, that when he pulled in there with that car, it was like there was an awe over the whole pit area and the grandstands.
Roger Smith. You know, a lot of A lot of young drivers have to follow in their father's footsteps, and it's kind of tough, especially up in the NASCAR ranks. You had to follow in the footsteps of one of the best starters Chicagoland ever had. Smokey Smith, what was it like watching your father do his thing?
First time I remember Raceway Park, showing my age, was 1951. My dad was racing and flipped the car, broke his collarbone, and I got a ride in Girardi ambulance, me and my mother, to St. Francis. After that, he became assistant starter, and I really didn't get a job there until I got out of the Army in '67, and I only worked a little bit. I think it was '68 I started completely full-time. And I worked the infield, then I worked the assistant starter to lights. When my dad retired, I took over the starter's position and had a good time there. It was fun to me. I had racing in my blood. As a young kid, my dad had a quarter midget club across the street from Raceway, and that's where I started, me and my brother in quarter midgets, and traveled around with those, and that's where I kind of got my start.
Did your dad give you any advice?
The only thing he said is those people behind you are paying your salary. You can't argue with them, you know, all that stuff. And I said, I really didn't have too much of a problem with the people in the grandstands. And like the other thing he said, you're messing with the driver's pay, but you're the one that calls the shots. Mm-hmm. And the worst one I had was with Jerry Kemperman, Richie Halligan's car. It was a special race, I don't remember. And as he'd go by, I'd get wet, and I'd get wet. Finally, I figured out who it was. Jerry's leading the race, black flag. When it was over, I had Richie Halligan and his wife Willie, one on the track, the other one in the stands. The next night, Richie came up, apologized. He said, "You saved me a motor by black flagging him." My other good time was the gentleman sitting to my farther right here wrote a story about me one night. And he was really criticizing me real bad. And I waited quite a while before I said, "Mr. Baranek, would you like to come in the starter stand?" And I think I only got him up there for the feature. And that was the last time he was ever up there. But he did write a very nice story the next time on me.
That was supposed to be an inside story. I was going to bring that up, actually, because the question I was going to ask you was, you know, I respect every starter at every racetrack because their job is so just high tension. You've got lives with that flag in your hands. And I can't imagine it was easier at any other racetrack. I mean, Raceway had to be the toughest racetrack to flag. What was the hardest part about flagging races at Raceway Park?
I really can't think of something that was hard. I mean, the scorers like Wayne Jr., he was great. Without him, and the other one, Joe D'Ambrose, they were both great scorers up there. I could keep track of maybe the first 5 or 6 cars. And after that, them guys would just rattle down the rest of the numbers. They'd fall in line and off we go. But I don't think I really had a hard time.
Well, was there a tough turn? Like, just the thing that we kind of had a difference about was throwing yellow flags. And I found out in a hurry the night I got in there with him how things happened very quickly. Was there, was turn 4 harder to look at than turn 2?
Yeah, turn 4 was harder than turn 2. And it did get a little bit hard if you had a good Monza or something to keep track of who's running up front, who they're passing and stuff like that. You know, you had to keep pretty good track of that. But besides that, no, I didn't really have a hard time. And everybody that I worked with, like when Bobby was at the pit gate, he would give me the lineup, and it was always, right on the money. Fred, I didn't see that much of. I see more of his dad. But I mean, out of all the officials, all of us got along really good. And I think Fred is probably the oldest. I worked the old Mazan with my dad and Raceway. I didn't go to O'Hare with him.
I want to ask, Bobby, I was going to ask you, how much coordination went into from the starter to the pit gate to upstairs in the box?
Well, you know, the upstairs they did the time trials and the lineups, and they'd call the lineups down to me. And you know, when we got the scoreboard, things were a lot easier. The drivers could see the time, and I made the lineups and got them out to Roger and Jim and the guys in the infield, and they made the, you know, set the cars on the racetrack. But talk about things that we couldn't control. The one weirdest night out at Raceway Park was I was standing by the pit gate, Roger's flagging the race, and as the cars cross the start-finish line, they all start sliding into the first and second turn wall. Frank Galinsky, and they're just piling up, and we look, and it's raining like a son of a gun into turn one. Not a drop by me, not a drop by Roger. And that was one of the freakiest nights that I ever worked at Raceway Park.
I do remember that night. Bobby Weltmeyer, I think, took a bad hit in that incident. Yeah, I want to turn to Fred for one last question here. You know, Wayne Adams, of course, Wayne Adams Sr. is the ultimate example of somebody who took a job at Raceway Park and never left it until he retired. It seems like a lot of people that took a job at Raceway Park stayed there. Why was that?
I guess it was all the people that were around, all the drivers and pit crew and all the guys you work with. Up to this day, we still go out for pizza with, you know, Raj and Bob and a couple of the other ones. So it was just like a family in some respects, you know. And you saw them all summer. At that time, when I was there, it was 4 nights a week. And, you know, I saw more of them than I did my own family, plus working my regular job. And any overtime I had there, you know, I put in 40-some years being a track official and doing that, and 40-some years at my job at the CTA with in the body shop there. So it was just you had a good time, you know.
Hey, Roger, when you go to other racetracks, or when you did go to other racetracks at the time, or even if you, I don't know if you ever took nights off at Raceway and just sat in the stands, one time, what was that? Bo and Bobby did it. But you went to other racetracks too. Did you find yourself sort of twitching that arm when you're watching the race?
No, I flagged at Ileana twice, I think. Once at Grundy, and once in Princeton, Illinois. That was the first dirt track I ever did. But
I mean, when you were just watching as a fan, do you find yourself criticizing the?
The only thing, truthfully, I criticized was Grundy and Ileana up in the air. I did not like being up there. I liked down right there on the ground. When they go by you 70, 80 miles an hour, that thing would just shake. And I liked it better on the ground. I was never, Raceway was on the ground.
Were you ever visited by a car in the box?
No.
What's the closest you came?
Probably in hot laps, the closest. You had McPartland and other guys like that would try to skim the wall as they go by me. Or McPartland would go by me with a squirt gun.
Mm-hmm.
But besides that, no. I had good times no matter where I went, but I just didn't like up in the air.
What was it like working for the Jenin family? Peter in particular.
At first, I didn't know him. I thought, well, he's a crusty old man. But then, as I got older, he treated me as family. Then I started going in the office more, and I ended up meeting his daughter, and I ended up marrying Darlene. But Peter never really treated me much better than anybody else. You know, I mean, I really never had an argument with him. And it was, a lot of guys here will say, you know, oh, he was a crusty old man and this, that. But if you got to know him, especially Bobby, he came down to Florida one year. He's growing flowers, he's got this going, he's got that going. Totally different man, totally different.
I see.
I mean, you had Walt Myers, Galinsky, a couple others would stop in the winter and see him. I mean, they knew what he was like away from that racetrack. But at the racetrack, he was a crusty old man, and what he said, that was it.
He was certainly one of a kind.
One of a kind, yes.
Gentlemen, thank you so very much for coming up here. Everybody, Bobby Talaski, Roger Smith, and Fred Jacoby. All right, everybody. Our final panel of the day, we're going to highlight 3 Raceway Park track champions. One of them is pretty legendary in his own right.
That's right.
I was looking at the all-time feature win list for Raceway Park not too long ago. Everybody knows that Bud Kaler was the winningest driver in Raceway history with 490 late model feature victories. Everybody knows that Bob Pronger was the second winningest driver at Raceway Park with 148 late model feature victories. Who can guess who's third on that all-time list of all-time late model feature victories?
Pat Eklund.
You're right, it's Pat Eklund. Pat Eklund had 117 late model victories, and when you throw in 17 in the other divisions, he finished in first place in 134 feature races during a career in which he won late model titles in 1984, 1991, 1992, and 1993. He would not take a bet from me that he would be the first one to win 4 in a row. He didn't try in 1994. At any rate, we have Pat Eklund here. On my immediate left was a guy who was pretty much a hot shot in the hobby stock division in the 1970s. His name's Jerry Clark. Jerry was the 1976 hobby stock champion, a winner of 25 feature races. On my right, a gentleman who competed in, really when I started going to Raceway Park, I really liked this division. It was a 6-cylinder division. It didn't last a ton of seasons, but it always had real competitive racing. Al had a banner season in 1975. He had 13 career feature wins, and I'm going to say most of them came in 1975.
Yes, that was all 75. It was all 1975. We won 13 features, we ran 42 shows, won 16 heat races, and set fast time 17 times.
And you remember that 45. So glad to hear you remember that, because so many guys don't remember how many wins they had.
It was like yesterday.
How special was that 6-cylinder class?
I think it was the greatest learning curve that a guy can understand race cars with the future of moving up in the late model division, because it was a training session. I raced with Pat. Pat was my biggest competition with Gene Schwartz in that time, and it made you learn about cars and other people and how to wait for that moment. You know, it's better to bring the car home in one piece than wreck it.
Now, anybody here who remembers Al Stuchel's car, it was pretty unique. It was a real silvery car, but it was 115 and the 1 was spelled out. Where'd you get that idea?
Well, my brother Rich came up with that when Ray Freeman had ME2, and the number 15 was taken on the register for the 6-cylinders, and we didn't want to go with 115, so my brother Rich says, well, we go with ONE 15, so the 15 would stand out like Ray did the ME2. So that's how that ONE 15 came about.
You kind of tapered off racing after that.
Yes, I did. I more or less got away from it as a car owner, driver, and spectated. And, you need a place to work on it. You need money to finance the car and people to help you. So after time went on, you kind of lose that now and then. And so if it's not there, you just do something else.
Now, the year before your championship season, you were working with that season's champion,
Tom Nielsen.
And that was probably the best season-long chase.
Yes, it was.
Between Tom Nielsen and Jerry Vallow, who was here earlier today. I was hoping to interview him, actually. But that went all the way down to the last weekend. Talk a little bit about that season.
Well, we were 6 nights late getting out, and Jerry was still running good, from last year, and he was, cleaning house out there till we came in, and then we started picking away at his points, and then on the last night, we were underdogs, and after the 40-lap season championship race, he got knocked out early on the races, and Gene Schwartz ended up winning that race, but we got second, but it was enough points to win the championship in 74.
Okay, let's turn our attention now to Jerry Clark. Jerry, earlier today, I was talking with Mike Varner about the golden age of the hobby stock division. And you certainly were blessed in your time, or I don't know if you considered it a blessing at the time, because it was awful darn tough to win a race. Just talk about those days and that particular era in the hobby stock division.
Does it look like old times? Yeah, there we go. Yeah, it was pretty tough back then. We had quite a few cars in the feature. They didn't know what a consolation was for the hobby stocks back then. And sometimes you had 30, 40 cars. You're starting to feature in the back. They were dropping the green when you're still on the back straightaway. But it was fun, and a lot of great drivers. Frank Galinsky, just to name one right there. Al Ponton was my competition back then. I think he was, 52 years old at that time? A real good driver.
Well, Jerry, then you actually did get to do some late model driving as well, and you had some success there.
Yeah, I jumped into Lonnie Prince's car at 1976 for the 300 lapper. And I was lucky enough to get to run against Kaler and Kepperman and Ray Young, Stosh, and everybody. And that was quite a thrill until you see him coming up in your mirror. And you can't get out of the way fast enough, but I got lucky and I finished 10th in that race. But yeah, it was a great time, and I feel fortunate to be able to race with those guys.
Let's spend a couple minutes now with Pat Eklund. Pat, you, of all the drivers in the history of Raceway, always struck me as the one having the most fun. You had fun after you won races. You would run backwards victory laps. Always had a smile on your face after the races. And you won. I mean, what was your magic formula?
I don't think it was a magic formula so much as I guess I had the frame of mind that I knew I wasn't going to be a NASCAR driver driving at Daytona. And just wanted to do the best I could with what I had at the time and carried it along. It was definitely fun and met a lot of good people.
Well, you had some real good associates that you raced with. Tom Weckler, Ray Robleski. What about those guys and what they meant to you?
Oh, obviously, all of them guys, Turtle was the start of my late model career, and learned how to build a car with him in the garage, and obviously went on from there. And Joe Rosinski, who's the car owner that I'm driving the vintage car right now, but Joe D'Ambrose, again, ran a few years for him. And then, of course, Ray with the Zero car was just 3 years of incredible fun and victories and a couple of pretty good championship parties, too, in the pits.
You are also pretty adventurous, as I remember, with your cars. You had that, I used to call it the aquarium car, because it had the big back on it.
The wedge.
The wedge, yeah. You just don't seem to embrace that technology.
Well, that was obviously Joe D'Ambrose's his idea. I believe he went to Ed Howe and told him, we don't have a weight rule, so build me a car that'll be fast and light. And that's exactly what he did. Joe came up with the style of the body. I think at that time maybe the dirt cars were starting to go with a wedge style like that. And I was in the trailer repair business, so I bought side panels. Trailer side panels is what the car was made out of. So at least the sides of the car. And it certainly surprised me on opening day when the thing was as fast as it was.
Were you the only driver in racing history to drive a Cambird?
Again,
tell the folks about your Cambird.
That was, again, a turtle car. And how we came up with that is kind of related to Larry sitting over there, but the junkyard dog. Anyway, Turtle found a rear clip for a Firebird, and we didn't have the complete car, so we had to look for front fenders and a hood, and wound up with a Camaro front end. And Tom came up with the idea of naming it the Cambird, and because he always got a kick out of Larry's car named the Junkyard Dog.
I want to turn back to Jerry here for a second. Grab the microphone there, Jerry. What was it? What made Raceway Park so special? I mean, why is everybody here today buying all of this memorabilia, telling stories that probably got switched 6 times since they originally occurred? What was so special?
Oh, it was like it was a home away from home for us. We were there 4 nights a week. A lot of times if I wasn't at the racetrack, I was working on the car. So we could be battling at the racetrack, and then after that, we were having a party and having fun hanging out with each other. So it was like a family. One day you're fighting, and the next day you're back together again, But I think the one thing that sticks out with me is the first time I won a feature. And back in the 60s and everything, I'd watch Wayne do his thing up in the booth, and he'd do the track announcing and here, and I was, really tickled about it. I come in the next day after winning a feature, and here comes Wayne walking up to the car. And he hands me a jacket, and he says, "You did a good job last night. Great feature." And there, Wayne Adams is talking to me. And it was fantastic. And I'm really, truly proud to call him my friend now. Happy birthday, Wayne.
Were you that excited the first time I interviewed you?
I think it was on the phone.
Oh, it was on the phone. Okay.
They called me on the phone. Yeah.
All right.
Remember.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up, folks, for the interview sessions for this year. Thank you all for hanging out here. Let's have one more round of applause for our 3 champions here: Al Stuchel, Jerry Clark, Pat Eklund.
Hi, welcome to the Chicagoland Racers Reunion Memorabilia Show. I'm here with Danny Penz, a renowned midget driver from the Midwest. How you doing, Danny?
Fine, thanks for having me here.
When did you start racing?
I started racing in 1982, and matter of fact, the first feature I won was at Blue Island, and Wade Adams, the gentleman here, he was the announcer, and he's going to be 100 years old in 6 months. That's how long I've been running.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was really neat back then. We had a lot of good times. I raced from 1982 to 1997. Then I quit for a while, and then I had a young son, and he's seen me race on different things. And I started racing last year for a couple races, And we actually won a feature at Grundy, and they let him start the feature. He was the flagman, so that was kind of made me real proud.
That's very cool. It's got to keep it going in generations.
Yeah, it's so fun. You see so many nice people here. This is great coming to an event you put on.
Well, we're really glad you came out. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me here.
You got any sponsor? Anybody you want to thank? Or
no, I'm just thankful to be able to still do it. I'm getting old. I'll be 58 in a couple months, and I'm just thankful to be able to do it again.
Well, make sure you look for the orange and white number 10 at local racetracks in the Midget Series. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me here. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you. Here we are at Chicagoland's Race Reunion Memorabilia Show, and we're here with Tom Smith, promoter of the Kankakee Speedway. Hey, Tom, what you got coming up this year?
Well, we got a lot of racing, and we're really excited about this year. It's bringing back some late model shows early in the season. We open up Mother's Day weekend that Friday, May 10th. The 17th, we got a special late model $2,000 to win special, and then we go into some big races like everybody knows the Summer Nationals that UMP drags through 30 races out about 35 days. They run 30 races, so that date is June 13th, a Thursday night. We're kind of excited. We had a real good year last year. Car counts have been phenomenal all last year, and we're really excited. It's almost like Christmas, a couple weeks away from getting opening up, and kind of neat to get going again, get this cold weather out of here and get some good weather coming in.
This always is a cool time for the year when racing starts, so I hear you made a couple changes, or?
Yeah, just a little bit. We looked at the racetrack quite a bit. We do a lot of work in the spring every year. We got a lot of high banks at the racetrack, so to alleviate some of the long work that we have to do in the spring, we actually brought the walls in a little bit. And we took the high side away a little bit at Kankakee County Speedway, even though, a lot of the fast guys get around the top shelf there. We brought it in a little bit to slow the cars down just a little, but to help us maintain the racetrack a little bit better. We were building quite a bit of cushion up in turn 3 and 4, so we brought it down about 6 feet and about 14 feet in, which should promote a little bit better racing when it comes down to, I'm always a firm believer, slow the cars down, you're going to have a lot better racing. So Dave Whittington and the staff there did a lot of work over the winter. Kind of got shut out early November, but we were back at it last week. We were doing some work out there, and they were out there yesterday with the good weather we had yesterday. So we should be pretty good. We're looking real excited. We're going to bring the entrance back into turn 4. I don't know if we'll have it ready for opening day, but the old days at Kankakee County Speedway, they used to come on the racetrack in turn 4 and go off in turn 3. Well, we're going to bring the cars on in turn 4, so kids can hang on the fence there and enjoy it a little bit, see their buddies and talk to people, kind of bring more interaction to the racetrack again instead of not knowing what's coming up in the back straightaway. This way it's going to be a little bit different where you can see the cars right there on the front straightaway.
Definitely sounds more competitive and fan-friendly, so it'll be cool. So
that's what we're looking for. We're trying to shoot for that, for sure.
Where you can get information at the website?
You can go on our website, KankakeeCountySpeedway.com, and we'll see you at the races.
Thank you very much, Tom. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Hi, we'd like to do a spotlight on one of our favorite local racers here. I'll let her introduce herself and tell her what she does.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Wren, and I race street stocks at the Grundy County Speedway in Morris, Illinois.
She's definitely a fan favorite, and she's there supporting the sport more than anybody I know almost. So you got any big plans for this year, or just?
I think I'm going to sit part-time this year, and I'm still going to do the kids stuff and have fun with that, with the bike night for kids night and backpack night for back-to-school night.
That's a fabulous thing she does every year, so make sure you watch for it on Facebook and stuff. She's a very good cause. So, anything else you want to say to any sponsors or anything?
No, see you guys at the racetrack this year.
Well, make sure you come out and see her. Follow her, Sharon Wren Racing on Facebook.
Thank you.
Thank you.